and achieve your career goals. Now, here is Marie Zimenoff.
Hello and welcome to the Career Confidant. We're so excited today to have a guest for you to learn from, Alex Budak. And Alex, you are a professor at UC Berkeley. Oh, you're a professor at UC Berkeley, and you're also teaching a course there and have a book on becoming a change maker. I'm just so excited to learn about this. Thank you so much for joining us.
Marie, delighted to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Alex, you've been teaching this course for a while, and you really talk to people about how to become a change maker. And tell me why this is becoming more and more important now, and how you define change maker.
Well, if the past few years have taught us anything, it's that we're living in a world of constant flux and constant change. As I make the case to my students on the first day, I believe that your success will be defined by your ability to navigate, shape, and lead change. Now, the question isn't just can we crawl under a rock and try to merely survive change? But I think the most effective leaders, the people that build meaningful and impactful careers, will be those that get comfortable with change and can learn to see it as an asset. Now, that's not easy. I don't pretend that it's easy, but there's a huge opportunity there for those of us to kind of change our relationship with change. Now, you mentioned, I think about change making. I put out a radically inclusive and a simple definition. So the definition I put out is simply a change maker, someone who leads positive change from wherever they are. So you'll see in the definition that there's no mention of roles or of titles or seniority level. It's this inclusive identity we can think about where it's about how we can lead change from wherever we are, about understanding the world around us and our role in shaping it. It's also an identity we can layer on top of our existing ones. So we can become a change maker lawyer, a change maker doctor, or just a change maker friend or change maker parent. It's a new way of seeing the world and our role in shaping it.
Ooh, I love that. So it's really about adapting and leading the changes that are happening. And as you mentioned, like this rapid pace of change has just accelerated even when we didn't think it could. How is that? How do you see that playing out with some of your classes right now? How are people experiencing this new pace of change?
One of the things I remember is I had less than 24 hours from the time where our school decided this is back at the onset of COVID. Less than 24 hours to be like, okay, I'm going to go in class in person tomorrow to nope, we're going remote. And I remember the wise words that a student of mine, she's probably 19, 20 years old. She said, no one knows what they're doing right now. We're all figuring this out as we go. And when she said that, I felt like a giant sigh of relief. It's actually this huge opportunity. We often get so stuck in our ways of doing things and think, oh, that's the only way that things can go, or just got to kind of continue going on it. But sometimes these disruptive moments can actually be a great chance for us to take a step back and sort of think about things. And really inspired by her words, I thought, well, hey, it's a chance to not just do things the way that they are, but think about how could we create a new path going forward. So many of my students, I teach undergraduates, graduates, and also executives. So folks everywhere from age 18 to 75. And I think everyone is trying to figure out what to do with this change. We're wrestling with questions around the Great Resignation, the Great Reset. How do we find more purpose, more impact in the work that we do? But also, how do we live a life that's true to who we are? And I think change making can be a lens that helps us understand some of our opportunities there.
Yes, because when you're involved in making the change, it's much more purposeful than just when you're responding to the change. And I love that you use that word purpose because people are really trying to figure out how to live with more purpose. And it sounds like change making is one way that you help people do that.
That's right. And I think what you're hinting at here is something that I like to call the art of agency. So, change making might sound exciting. Maybe it sounds inspiring, but some of your listeners might also say, it sounds kind of fuzzy. And I get that, right? I'm at Berkeley. I'm grounded in empirical research and data. And so I've actually set out to do a study, which I call the Changemaker Index, which looks at, what are the traits that the most effective change makers have in common, irrespective of age, sector, role. And we're beginning to crunch the data, which is super fun, super interesting. We're seeing patterns. And one of the things the most effective change makers do is, again, have this sense of agency, this belief that life doesn't just happen to me. I go and create my opportunities. I go and create things, make things happen. And I think when folks can make that cognitive switch to being someone who makes things happen, then that unlocks not just change, but also a lot of other really positive things in our career as well.
I love that. Any other themes that you're seeing as you look at the data?
The other one I love is that we find that the most important leadership technique, right? There's a lot of different leadership techniques. We find that for leading change, that influence is so much more important than formal authority. And I find it fascinating because, again, I teach people everywhere from 18 all the way to more senior executives. And in general, the older you are, the more experienced you are, the more confident you are in leading change. But it doesn't mean necessarily that you're more effective, because we're seeing that what it takes to actually be effective is no longer being able to say, okay, because of my title, because of my role, this is what you have to do, but find ways to encourage, inspire, and get other people to be part of the changes with you. And that's a new skill set I think so many of us are learning right now. But it's also a fun opportunity to think about, okay, if it's no longer about my title, it's no longer about my role, no longer about telling others what to do, then what becomes possible when I think about influencing and inspiring others to be part of the change with me?
Yeah, and that word influencer has had so much baggage around it, since the Instagram influencer came to be. But it's, as I love your description of it there, it's really that encouragement, inspiring, getting others to make change. Tell me a little bit more about what you see going into that influence skill
Yes.
set.
Yes, I think you're exactly right. So when we hear the word influence, probably think of two things. So one is that sort of like Instagram influencer. And the second one is maybe if some of your listeners have gone to like business school, you sometimes learn influence techniques. And honestly, they can sometimes feel kind of sleazy, right? You might learn something like the reciprocity effect. That's the idea that, like, Marie, I go do something really nice for you. You don't even want me to do it. You don't like me, but just because I did something nice for you, you feel compelled to do something nice for me in return. And that's how we often think about influence. But needless to say, that isn't the type of influence that change makers practice. So I've come up with 5 different influence superpowers, 5 ways of influencing others sustainably and for the long term. To briefly go through them, you start with empathy. So being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. I think so crucial, right? Empathy isn't the same as sympathy, but empathy, before you try to influence someone, before you try to get them to do something with you, I'd understand where they're coming from. Are they new to the job and totally overwhelmed? Are they just super excited about this change? Or maybe are they a new parent and just so overwhelmed with life outside of work that they don't have time to think about a new project? All of these are valid. Understand where they're coming from before you even try to influence. The second is relationships. Now, relationships take time, of course, but sometimes people will be part of your change simply because they know that you care about them and they care about you. I think about recently, a friend of mine reached out and said, "Hey, Alex, I'm running a race to raise money for this rare disease that had affected one of his loved ones. Would I support him?" And in a second, I said, "Yes, of course, absolutely." But as I thought about it, it wasn't because of the cause. I mean, it's a good cause, a noble cause, but it wasn't one of my most important causes. The reason I supported him was because of our relationship. And so he could have made an ask for one of 500 different causes, and I would have been all in because of our relationship. The
Oh,
third is vision. With vision, I like talking about painting a picture of the future that's so compelling that people can't help but want to be part of it with you. And so you're painting that picture, but then also crucially, you're helping folks understand how their contributions lead to that bigger picture. Maybe you're trying to influence an accountant to be part of a change effort. Help them see how their work crunching the numbers or coming up with financial analysis statements, how that helps you achieve that collective goal. The fourth is passion. And I think change makers are naturally passionate. We often feel a lot of pressure to sort of tamp down on that passion, whether that's as we kind of get more senior in our careers or we think we have to be more serious. But I think passion's a superpower. And so if you truly are passionate about something, let that passion out. Let people feel excited about it. Because again, going back to our conversation on purpose, passion can help people unlock their sense of purpose. And then fifthly and finally is safety. So I recognize that not everyone appreciates change, certainly the way I do, but even are that comfortable with change. And so I think we as change makers have an obligation to look out for and support those who maybe find change a bit more scary. And so how can you make it safe for others to be part of changes with you? Here's one very tactical technique I use, which is, if I find someone who wants to be part of the change, they're bought in on the vision, but they just kind of feel scared. I might say something like, "Look, I get that it's scary. Here's my promise to you. If you come along, if you contribute, and it works, I promise you will get the praise. And I promise if it doesn't work, that I will take the blame." That's a small way to make it safe for others to be part of the change with you.
yeah. I also like to encourage people to think of things as an experiment. So right now we've got so much going on with ChatGPT, and in the career space, people are freaking out, right? Will ChatGPT be writing resumes and career coaching and we're not gonna have a job? So, well, let's go and experiment with what this can do. let's write a resume with it, because then you'll know what it could do, what the drawbacks are, where you add value beside it, and you can incorporate it if you want. But it's the experiment isn't about being successful. It's not about having the right prompts. It's just about playing around with it so that you can see, do you want to take it to that next step or not? It's just an experiment. And like you said, if we fail, what are the consequences? And if you do it in, the privacy of your own computer, no one even has to know that you've tried it out, and you don't have to have some of those consequences. So I love that idea of
Oh,
just figuring out other ways to feel safe while you experiment.
I love that so much. It's one of the things that I often work with executives on is to get them to think like a scientist. And it's based off of one of my favorite research studies of the last decade. So these researchers worked with entrepreneurs in an Italian accelerator, right? So people that had startups and they just did one super simple intervention. The only thing they did, they took half of the startups and they taught them the scientific method, right? So hypothesis testing, thinking like a scientist. And they found that that one simple intervention made those that had learned that much more likely to pivot, to change direction, and also generated much higher revenue. It's fascinating to me because that's such a simple intervention. But all they were doing was, like you said, Marie, giving people permission to run experiments. That so often in our careers and our work and our life, we sort of put all this pressure on this one big decision, this one big move. But you kind of never know until you actually start something if it'll work. And so if we can have that confidence and that comfort that comes from running experiments, it gives us the ability to just try things. Maybe it works, in which case, great. And if it doesn't work, we can pull from the worlds of lean startup, where they say there's no such thing as failure. It's validated learning. You launch something, it doesn't quite work. You try a new career, it doesn't quite work. You haven't failed. No, it's actually a win. You figured out something that doesn't work for you, that doesn't give you joy. Great. Now move on to the next experiment.
Oh, I love that. And we're going to talk about failure. So we're going to take a short break. If you're joining us live or you're watching this on YouTube, you can come over to the Career Confidant Radio, and we're going to finish up the rest of our interview with Alex on our Career Confidant Radio spot. Just love this idea of change making and how people can rethink about failure, about leadership. And we're going to dive into those two topics a little bit more when